two hikers made their way down the long dirt path on foot. Its winding course ran ever onward through the vast wooded coves they studied and discussed in the ancient log cabins they spotted, sitting lonely and displaced from time. Occasionally, leaving the main road, they would wander down a path surrounded on both sides by great swaying waves of wild cracks, so that they were awash in the feeling of having crossed over into another reality, where the people had lived in a delicate partnership with the land around them. Here, submerged in the swaying waist-high straw, they would discover the small, rough-hewn log homes of residents who had lived, hunted, and farmed the cove over a century previous. Outside, the dark wooden structures, built low into the earth to weather the violent and sometimes life-threatening winds, floods, and tornadoes, were plaques set by the main entrance. The gray metal signs would give accounts of the family which had resided in the primitive barracks, and then describe the account of the family's often brutal lives. The cove was a remarkable attraction, a museum of the lost lives and hidden histories, preserved by the state as a reminder of a pioneering spirit which had brought settlers into the rough wilderness so many years ago. Remy stood as he entered through the low overhang of the entrance and gazed with wonder and admiration at the rough Spartan quarters within. He could barely imagine a family thriving in the small dirt-floored rooms now in the warm summer, let alone sustaining themselves through a long and arduous winter. Klaus studied the warped support beams and intermittent scrawls of graffiti left over the decades by various tourists with interest and distaste. Squinting over the top of his small rectangular sunglasses, he shook his head with disgust as he read "Gary and Lisa Forever" carved into one of the logs by the door. Why must people choose a piece of history onto which to carve or proclaim their ridiculous feelings for each other? He said as he turned his attention to the hearth, which once had been the home's only source of warmth. But aren't those proclamations as much a part of this place's history as anything else? Remy replied as he surveyed the names as if recalling his own youth and loves. You are a hopeless romantic, Klaus said distantly as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small notepad in which he began scribbling with a pen taken from behind his ear. If people wish to do obscenities and immortalize their relationships, they should use subways and restrooms, not landmarks of priceless scholastic value. But they do not see this value, my friend. To the young people who wrote these messages, these cabins are no more significant than an old utility shed sitting in a vacant lot. So your argument is that their stupidity and ignorance excuses their defacement. This very attitude is why the young take such great liberties with places and things of historical significance. Age fosters appreciation, my friend. It is only as we grow older and realize that so little of ourselves and our time here will be left behind that preservation of the past becomes relevant. Then it is a shame that the young hold such great sway over the world. Youth can destroy priceless artifacts in one brief moment of carelessness. Yes, it is true, and as the average lifespan of modern man lengthens, the time and influence of youth grows. Why, we were in our 50s and may well have seen 4 or 5 more decades while the people who lived in these cabins considered themselves venerable at 30 or 40. Can you imagine, Remy, a life spent toiling in this wilderness? And for what aim? Freedom. They came here to live as they pleased. First-generation immigrants who were looking to get away from some convention of that time's society. This was their answer, and now all that remains are their hopes. So what do you think? Shall we attempt to journey back and see what we may? Yes, but it would be wonderful to actually see the family which inhabited this cabin. If I had known in life that I would be able to travel through time, I would have studied my history more intently. I wonder if these people were German immigrants. I believe they were Irish Scots. Oh well, we can watch them swill whiskey then. Dead 20 years and you are still a bigot, Klaus. Did it occur to you that they must have achieved some level of spiritual enlightenment since their spirits are not wandering around with us? Perhaps, or maybe they're just not at home right now. Besides, you know what ghosts... They can't see each other. Some things never change. Ah, wait a minute. Someone's coming. Oliver and Patricia parked their Jeep by the side of the long gravel road and stepped out into the bright summer day. They stretched and gazed over the rolling green hills of the cove and hugged before joining hands and walking up the path towards the third cabin they had seen during their honeymoon adventure. They stopped and read the plaque, which explained that this had been the homestead of the McClagans. Douglas McClagan, an Irish farmer, had arrived in the New York harbor in 1793 and had made the journey south, where he had married a Cherokee woman and begun his family on this land. "Can you imagine that?" Patty said, fascinated, as she peeked inside one of the windows. "I wonder if they were happy." "What kind of question is that?" Oliver balked as he slapped her posterior playfully. "They were probably happier than a lot of modern families. I bet old Douglas never had to stop in at the local doctor and ask for a prescription of antidepressants before going home, hoping his insurance would cover it." "This might be the dumbest thing you've ever said," Patty commented, as she entered the musty, dark interior. "Good Lord, it would be like living in a cellar," she whispered as she brushed a cobweb which had become interwoven with her blonde hair. "Hey, look, people have carved their names on the walls," Oliver exclaimed enthusiastically as he took his pocket knife from his pocket. "Oh, don't do that, Ollie. It's so destructive." "It's a tradition, Patty. Here, I'll carve a heart with our names in it." Just as he was about to begin his endeavor, his hand froze over the bare timber, where he had intended to place his engraving. "Oliver, are you all right?" Patty asked as she placed her hand on his shoulder. As his head slowly turned, she moved back with sudden cold fear, which he saw in his eyes. His face had become ashen and gray, his mouth twisted somewhere between a snarl and a grimace, as he grabbed her by the back of her hair and, taking the small 3-inch blade, slashed it across her throat. The soft flesh split open as a river of crimson warm blood spilled out over the white of her blouse, and she fell stunned and dying to the dirt floor. Standing over her, she watched as the maddened look only deepened in his gaze, while he took the now red, moistened blade and performed an identical surgery on his own jugular. As quickly as the madness had arrived, it had vanished as Oliver fell to his knees with astonishment. He looked at the blood which pooled in his hands, gagging and sputtering, as he looked into Patty's horrified eyes with complete confusion. Soon their vision grew dark as all light faded. "Klaus, how could you?" Remy said as he watched his friend's spirit peel itself free from the flesh of the tourist. "We will never find enlightenment if you insist on indulging these outbursts." "What are 2 more deaths at this point?" he laughed as he stared at the two amusedly. "Come, let us be gone before they discorporate." Remy stared at his comrade with the disappointed expression of a parent weary of a troublesome, spoiled child. Yet it had been so long since he had seen the sight of fresh blood that the violence invigorated him. It was only after they had left the cabin that they noticed the change which had so stealthily overtaken the atmosphere of the sky. The sky had become a bizarre dark blue-green of tempestuous clouds and flashing bursts of bluish lightning. The trees of the vast surrounding hills were swaying and reaching in a powerful wind, which seemed to be blowing from all directions simultaneously. They watched as dozens of stoic gray forms began to manifest as if coalescing from a vague and transparent mist. The group, which in time was assembled before them, was a gathering community of dark shades, who, although were dressed in the garb of country folk from a previous century, wore upon their face masks of various species of wild animal. Stepping from the center of the throng was a tall figure clad in a long robe of deer hide, with the skull and antlers of some great deer over the top of his face. Peering out from behind the mask were eyes blazing with anger as he strode to the front of the crowd and pointed a long staff of carved oak at them with impudence. "I am Douglas McClagan, last of the Feely, and the guardian of the sacred grove. How dare you intrude here and spill mortal blood without provocation in this holy land? Remy and Klaus found themselves recoiling from the booming thunder fury of the imposing figure's voice. Can ghosts have a religion? Klaus said as a crack of thunder seemed to confirm the answer. What manner of men are you, so wretchedly and pointlessly slay the innocent? The question struck them both as rhetorical, as it seemed the strange spirit priest had already drawn a stern conclusion as to their nature. We are, or were, killers, Klaus retorted, suddenly indignant. We met each other in a prison cell and died in the electric chair. We were somewhat rehabilitated up until now, Remy offered in weak defense. You allowed you to pass into the boundaries of our sphere, and in return you taint it with your obscenity. There was a whispered communion amongst the others as the community seemed to discuss and agree upon the words of their leader. Those idiots were carving gibberish into the walls of your home, Klaus exclaimed with confusion. I would think you would be grateful. You would think me grateful that you spoiled the land with corruption in the act of a useless sacrifice, in the protection of dead wood? The robed figure laughed bitterly as he held his hands out to the crowd as if in deposition. It is not as if they cut a sacred living tree for pleasure or felled a beast with pride. The man was proclaiming his love for his woman on the wall of an empty and useless building. A man's love is greater a gift than the remains of some shack. I would have been more offended had he left a fire unattended in the forest. Your judgment has been passed. We've been judged guilty before you, Irish scum, and no man will pass judgment on us again. Klaus shook his fist with rage at the horned priest, but his self-righteous rant was cut short-lived as the earth began to bubble and soften beneath their feet. The crowd was chanting in unison as their antlered leader held his staff to the sky. Remy went to flee, but found his feet sinking into the earth as if held by a solid and unbreakable grip. Klaus fought and struggled as now the earth had opened up beneath them, and they slid desperately, flailing into the darkness of a widening pit. Your sentence is to be given back to the earth, from whence you have sprung, McCragen called out now. Only their hands grasped at the grass and roots for some hold by which to slow their descent. They had but one last glimpse of the gathered animal faces as they were at last swallowed by the hungry earth before it once again sealed firm and suffocating over their spirit forms. The two ghosts lay suspended and aware in the impenetrable blackness, unable to move, scream, or